Carol. Entry 1, March 22nd, 1985. I finally arrived at the small town where I'll be conducting the case I was assigned to, and now that I am done unpacking for the long stay, I can finally study this assignment in more detail. A rather strange one, if you ask me. Several children have gone missing in this area over the past 20 years, and there's no evidence of what happened to them or where they go. It is as if they vanished into thin air, as one local newspaper puts it. Regardless of all the previous failed investigations, even with one resulting in an agent retiring from his job and for some undisclosed reason, the Bureau has named me as one of their best agents and told me, if anyone can solve this case, it's you, Fox. However, what seemed odd to me is that apparently no one outside the Bureau has heard of this story, and that it is to stay that way for classified reasons. Weird, I thought, but it's a better job than taking prank phone calls from immature kids. So I headed on over and arrived at this cozy little house I'll be staying. Full view of the town from the top of the hill where the house is situated. I'll have a perfect overview of any suspicious activity that may occur. Tomorrow, I'll begin my investigation into the case. After a long drive, the only thing on my mind is food and some good old, well-deserved rest. Entry 2, March 23rd, 1985. Waking up this morning, I decided to begin with possibly the easiest task, interviewing friends and relatives of the missing children. Heading out to town, I arrived at the home of one family who had lost their 8-year-old daughter, Ruby, 5 years ago. They were oblivious to how or why it had happened, although they had their suspicions about a certain town member being responsible for not only their daughter's disappearance, but all the others too. Apparently his name is Marcus Wren. 65 years of age, he tends to hang around the local park where the children are playing games with each other. Nothing suspicious has been found about him even after the police obtained a warrant to search his home. He claims, "I'm just a lonely old man with nothing to look forward to but death." With another lead in my collection, I thanked the family for their hospitality. Just as I was about to leave, the family's other child, a 12-year-old boy called Brandon, came bursting through the door. He apologized profusely to me, and then proceeded to beg his mom if he could stay out for another hour. "I promise I'll be okay. Besides, Carol's keeping an eye on us." "Alrighty then," sighed his mom. "But be back in time for dinner, okay?" "Thanks a bunch, Mom," he replied. Just as he was about to leave, I asked if I could tag along. "Sure you can, mister. More the merrier. I'll go tell Carol to expect another." Before I even had a chance to ask who Carol was, he charged off in the direction of the park. I eventually caught up to him in the park and saw about 4 or 5 other children there with him. No adults in sight, only children. Confused, I asked where this Carol woman was. "She's over there, silly," one of the younger girls replied, pointing at a bench on the other side of the park, which no one was sitting in. Swiftly, one of the older girls whispered something in her ear. "Oh yeah, that's right, you can't see her." At this point, I felt like the children were pulling my leg. A little joke on the new guy in town. Realizing that the gag was up, I told them to be very proud that they fooled someone of my standards. The children then proceeded to look confused. "You think we're joking, don't you?" the boy asked. "They never believe us. No one does. They all think we're just a bunch of jokers," Brandon told the other children. He looked genuinely sad, as did a few of the other children. Eventually, one of the older girls decided to attempt to explain to me what they're on about. "You see, Carol is like a guardian angel to all the children that live in this town. She always keeps an eye out on us when we decide to play, and she makes sure that we get home safely. When Ruby, Tyron, and the others went missing, she searched the whole town for them with us. we found nothing, but even Carol can't save everyone, and she gets really depressed when a child goes missing. She told us that we're the only things that keep her from leaving. My darling pixies, she calls us." The girl then proceeds to look towards the bench and smile. "The reason why you can't see her is because grown-ups don't need protecting like children, so they don't need to see her. At least that's what Carol told us." I asked the girl if I could at least have an idea of what Carol looked like, although I had no idea why I would need to or want to, so she drew me a quick picture with a pencil on my notepad. Needless to say, I was a little shocked that this thing was looking after the children, if it even was really there. I decided to leave the kids to play by themselves, with Carol watching over them. As I was leaving, I had an urge to stare towards the bench that the so-called Carol was supposed to be sitting on. As I did, I felt an immense pain in my head. I felt like something had looked into my soul and deemed me unworthy of its time. I felt drained, sore, and hurt, and I rushed to my car as fast as my aching body would allow me to, and drove home. Upon arriving home, I made an account in my investigation report after taking some medicine to nullify the pain. As I came to writing the part about Carol, my hands just stopped. Would anyone really believe me? That the children believed that some entity was watching guard over them? I decided against writing anything about her, simply putting that the children knew nothing. It's not like it would make a difference into the investigation anyway. I'm here on a missing persons case, not some bloody X-file. I'm going to need some rest. Hopefully tomorrow will go better without me having any type of paranormal encounters. Entry 3, March 24th, 1985. I woke up today to the sound of police sirens outside my house and banging on my door. Dressing to answer the door, I opened it to find the town's police chief. There's been another missing persons report, this one by the Bree family. Their 14-year-old daughter, Jessica, never came home last night. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I had been in this town for less than 2 days, and already there's another missing child. I asked to see a picture of the girl, and when I saw her, I was even more shocked. This Jessica was none other than the girl who explained Carol to me yesterday afternoon. After being shocked, I thanked the chief and told him that I'd write into town later to question the family of Jessica. He then shocked me even more by telling me they left early this morning. They couldn't handle this place anymore. The only reason why we know Jessica's missing is because of the letter they sent us. He then proceeded to hand me a letter. See what you can make of it, Agent. I thanked the chief and went back inside. I felt confused, I felt shocked, but I mostly felt uneasy. Jessica had trusted this Carol, even going so far as to get me to believe in her. Then she goes missing? If Carol does exist, then why doesn't she try to attempt to save the children? With questions that need answering, I opened up the letter in hopes of finding at least a few of those answers. Fuck this town. It's brought us nothing but fear and now loss. Not just to us, but to over 20 other families. No evidence, no abductor found, not even a fucking motive. We're leaving. Have fun with your fucking investigation and don't contact us at all. P.S. Carol, we know of you. We know you exist and we know you have something to do with this. If you ever come and attempt to talk to us, we'll make you sorry. Sorry you ever had anything to do with our Jessie. That last part was probably the creepiest. The Brees knew of Carol, and by the looks of it, they think she's real. That must mean that the majority of the adults here know of her. However, what scares me is that if this Carol really does have something to do with this, and nothing can stop her. If she's real, first of all. I eventually headed out to town, and along the way, I saw what appeared to be a derelict property. The exterior of the house was rotting in places, with boarded up windows and graffiti all over it. The majority of the house was covered by the words, "Give us our kids back, creep," with the rest of it being nonsense. It didn't take an agent to figure out that this was the house of Marcus Wren. As I headed out through the open doorway, I saw the word Carol written in red across the rotting door several times. I continued on inside. Inside, it seemed as if someone was keeping the house in good condition. The walls were painted a baby blue, with the wooden flooring looking as if it had recently been restored. There was food in the cupboards, power running through the house. It all looked like a regular house. Then I headed upstairs. An immediate stench hit me as I arrived on the last step. It was as if something had crawled up there and died several times over. It was up there that I noticed a change in the house. The walls weren't painted, and they were rotted as bad as the outside. The flooring was dirty and moldy, and the ceiling was partially missing in areas. All the rooms were just as bad as the hallway, except for the last one. And oh boy, was the stuff in here information to me. The room was completely dark, aside from a notice board on the far wall. As I got closer, I noticed that it was a map of the town, with other photos, drawings, and notes all across it. The first thing that caught my eye was a red circle around the location of the park, with the note "most commonly found here," and a picture of the park underneath it. Next was the town high street, circled in with the words "will avoid as often as possible" written beside. The final thing that caught my eye was on the outskirts of the map. It was circled multiple times with "nest" written in capitals alongside it. Underneath, there was a picture of a large cave opening in the mountains. I took the picture, then put it in my pocket. I might need this, I thought. "It's nice to finally meet you, Agent Fox," a voice said from behind me. I spun around and pulled my concealed gun out of its holster, only to see an old man standing there before me. Now, no need for that. I simply wish to talk. I'm Marcus Wren, by the way. You've probably heard of me." He sat down in one of the few chairs in the room and stared at the map for a while. "It's taken me at least 10 years to figure all of this out. No one believes me, especially the kids. They think she's their guardian angel. And I know she hates me, probably more than I hate her." He looked at me and saw the confusion in my eyes. Yes, you have no fucking idea what I'm on about, do you? Well, let me tell you. This town has been around for about 100 years, and she's been here longer. How long? Well, God only knows, and if God knows, then he knows what abomination he's created with her. Carol first came into mention when the first few children that lived in this town asked the local doctor what she was. They described her to him, and even drew a picture. The doctor had absolutely no clue what this thing was, and asked if the children could show him to her. Of course, you can guess what happened. The doctor thought the kids were joking, and he told them that he had way more important things to do than to be fooled by some kids. It was after this that she approached them, comforted the children whenever they needed it, played with them, protected them. If only the kids knew what her true motives were. Marcus leaned forward. "She craves the blood of children. Just as cigarettes are pleasure for smokers, blood of children is her pleasure. Disgusting, yes, but she finds it disgusting how we eat cows, pigs, and sheep and yet care nothing for their well-being. But I digress. This abomination is real, Agent. She won't stop until she's dead, which may never even happen. For all we know, she could outlive the entire human race itself. They only started to release details about the missing children within the past 20 years, mostly because of all the conspiracies surrounding the disappearances. I doubt any of the earlier cases will come to light, though." I didn't know how to feel at that point. My brain simply refused to come up with any possible explanation for any of this. How could this be real? People know if this thing existed? I'm sure of it. I could only utter 3 words at that moment. What the fuck? I know how you feel, Agent, Marcus told me. I felt the same way when my mother told me all of this. She was among one of the first kids to meet her, and one of the lucky ones that grew out of being eaten. The only thing I don't know is how she learned all of this, but I presume it was mostly because of talking to Carol. Now my mother is dead, and I'm the only person who truly understands her motives. But hopefully, now you do too, after all that. I slowly nodded, but not sure whether to believe him or to immediately report Marcus to the police. I saw no reason for him to lie. I felt inclined to help him. If you ever need anything, I told him, you know where to find me. He nodded. You know, it feels good to actually have someone who believes me and doesn't think I'm some bloody He got up and went downstairs. I followed him, said goodbye, and took my leave. Watch out, he called out from behind me. Carol may only like the blood of kids, but that won't stop her from killing adults. And that sent a shiver down my spine as I drove away in my car. I arrive in town and interview a few of the kids about Jessica and her family. They seem to be oblivious to why they left and wish they'd come back. They were nice people, Brandon told me. Jessica was really cute too, and I love her too much for her to be gone. With that, Brandon started crying. The others teared up and asked me to stop the disappearances. Where's Carol today? I asked them. One of the girls pointed towards the bench again. I stood upright and looked directly at the bench. I felt as if I was being looked at again, but this time I leered back at the invisible monster. It's okay, kids. I'll stop these disappearances once and for all. I left the park and headed home, knowing Carol now knows she has another threat to watch out for. I eventually arrived home and decided against putting anything to do with Carol in my investigation report. This was now a personal task, something that needed to be done for the future of this town. Going to be locking my doors and the windows tightly before eating tonight. God only knows what Carol will do to me if she gets a hold of me, but I'll have to get a hold of her first. Tonight, I plan to stake out this so-called nest. She will hopefully return later on tonight. If I don't come back and you're listening to this, then get your ass out of this town. Entry 4, March 25th, 1985. I'm done. I'm completely done with this town. There's too much shit going on here, and after last night. Okay. I'll start from the beginning. After my latest diary entry, I headed over to Marcus and asked him if he can guide me into the cave in which Carol supposedly nests. You'll find nothing there, son. I staked out that place about 1,000 times. Most of what I've seen is lost deer wandering out from the cave, although I've never gone in there myself, because I know if I do, the chances of me wandering back out are pretty slim. Regardless of his experience, I felt like I needed to stake it out tonight. It had to be tonight. He took me to the spot, which was about an hour's hike from the town. The area was densely packed with trees that rose higher than the tallest steeple. After some time of wandering through the forest, I saw the cave entrance, Carol's nest. Well, have fun, Marcus told me. If you see anything, then you're clearly hallucinating. And with that, he left for his home. I wish I had gone with him, gave up this silly idea. After about 2 hours of nothing, I heard footsteps ahead of me. I looked through my binoculars and almost cried out at what I saw. Brandon was walking towards the cave, his hand gripped by some invisible entity. He didn't seem to be struggling at all, and he was actually smiling as he carelessly walked towards the entrance. I couldn't do anything to save him without risking my own life. As selfish as that seems, it would have been pointless to rush out there and try to grab him. Carol knows this place better than anyone and would have 2 people to toy with instead of 1. So as guilty as I felt, I had to leave Brandon to his demise. I watched him enter the cave, and that was the last of any kind of activity that occurred that night. I waited for another 2 hours as I headed over to the cave entrance. By this time, it was 2 a.m. in the morning, and I was dead tired. As I arrived at the opening, I got that feeling of something staring into my soul again, except this time I could feel the aggression and the anger radiating from these invisible eyes. I stepped towards the cave. An ear-splitting screech radiated from deep in the cave, and there was so much pain and aggression in the cry that I immediately ran. Away from the cave, away from Carol, away from death. Somehow, I found my way home. I got straight to bed and sank into a haunted sleep. When I woke the next day, I immediately made my way to Marcus's home. When there, I explained what happened last night. Well, you lucky bastard. Catching her in the act and not... Shit, even I haven't done that. After we talked, we headed over to the cave. At first I was reluctant, but Marcus assured me that Carol will be gone. She's never home during the day, always keeping an eye on the kids. I doubt she thinks she'll return. Again, I found myself outside of the mouth of her nest, gathering up all of my courage. We ventured in, towards the madness, the death, towards hell itself. The cave was a rather deep one, going on for a while. I almost gave up before I saw a light up ahead. Marcus and I headed towards it, but immediately recoiled at what we saw. Bodies. Bodies everywhere. There were skeletons, rotting corpses, piles of flesh, everything you can imagine from a horror film, all in this one cave. Parts of the body looked like they had large bite marks in them. Others were simply bloodless and devoid of all fluids. I was so disgusted, I threw up my breakfast on a pile of flesh. That'll put Carol off for dinner tonight, Marcus joked, somehow unfazed by the majority of this mess. He helped me through the corpses, and I stopped when I noticed 2 bodies in particular. Bodies of Jessica and Brandon, holding hands, completely drained of all fluids. They looked as if they were sleeping. A tear fell down my face. Carol has gone too far. I suddenly became filled with anger and regret. I could have saved Brandon, maybe even Jessica, if I had figured out this monster's motives earlier on. I banged my fist against the cave wall, needing something to take my anger out on. After Marcus calmed me down, I got up and we headed towards the light. When we arrived at it, I noticed that it was a lantern placed on top of 2 pieces of paper. Picking up the lantern and placing it elsewhere, I looked at the paper. They were photos of me and Marcus, with the words, "Kill," written on them in blood. I don't even know how Carol got a picture of me, especially one of me in my home. If she knows where I live, what's the point? She already knows. Anyways, Marcus and I were shocked at this, but what happened next was the worst moment of my life. Suddenly, I heard a demonic laugh from behind us. Turning around and pulling my gun out, I came face to face with what I feared I would. Carol, in her grotesque beauty, stood before me, completely visible to my and Marcus's eyes. Her huge, rounded bulk of a head was directly in my line of sight, with those horrible disc-like eyes resting on it. I could see the pure evil in those cold, dead eyes of hers, and will never forget looking into them. Her body, larger than any bear I've ever seen. She was a demon, a real demon. I couldn't move, I couldn't pull the trigger, hell, I couldn't even scream. We simply locked eyes for what it felt like a millennia, and then she proceeded to stare at Marcus for a while before making a sort of whistling sound with her mouth. Carol then lunged at Marcus and grabbed his neck with her talon-like claws. "Run!" he cried out. "Get the fuck out of here!" Carol tightened her grip around his neck and he started to choke. "Run!" he screamed. I'm not one to disobey orders. I ran through the bodies, through the darkness and into the light. Breathing heavily, I carried on running. I ran as far as I could before I had to stop for a breath. My mind was a mess of images that will haunt me to my grave, and of Marcus's face. Marcus. He was the only friend I had around here, and now that bastard has taken his life. Eventually, following the path I took to get here, I arrived home. Not wasting a moment, I packed all my things and put them into my car. No way I'm staying here. Screw this case. My life is more important, and I already know who the culprit is. I'm done with the Bureau, bloody sending me here on some fucking X-file. I'm done with them. I'm done with everything. Police report. Victim, 34-year-old Alexander Fox, was found dead in his home on the 26th of March, 1985. He appears to have been decapitated, his ribcage opened completely, and his heart removed. Postmortem revealed no fingerprints on the body, and a forensic investigation revealed nothing. Police are also looking for the missing 65-year-old Marcus Wren, who disappeared at around the same time as Alexander Fox was murdered. Many other town residents are beginning to move out due to all the murders and disappearances occurring recently. No one knows the culprit, and it is doubtful that he will ever be found. Case unsolved. Added into the casebook, The Town of Vanishing Children. Epilogue. 1 week later, after seeing most of the children off out of town, Carol was left with no one to supervise and only adults in the town. Realizing her work was done, she returned to her cave. After following the unusual route she took through the trees, Carol eventually arrived outside her cave. Stood there, waiting for her to return, was none other than Marcus. Carol revealed herself to him, but he didn't seem to be all shocked to see her. "So, are all the kids gone?" he asked her. Carol nodded. Marcus started laughing. "Well then, looks like our work here is done. What's this, the 4th town this century? It's pretty good." Marcus started walking down the pathway into the town's center, and Carol silently followed him. "Are you ready to move on to the next? We'll have this entire country full of ghost towns. Then, the puny humans won't bother us anymore." That pathetic investigator, he really thought he could stop us. But I bet he would never have expected to see this. Suddenly, Marcus started to change physically. His eyes became as dark as the night sky, his head swelled up immensely, and his fingernails and teeth became as sharp as knives. He looked like the spitting image of Carol, a male version of her grotesque figure. The two creatures looked at each other. Then they began to smile, and as fast as Carol could appear, they both disappeared, never to be seen again in this ghost